In the previous 7 panels and special conversations that have been conducted, we've explored a whole variety of issues and problems. We've also talked a little bit about the extent to which change is sometimes difficult to identify or to execute. Our panel is going to move quite a way away from those conversations. What we're going to be more focused on are some of the major changes that are going on that companies have an option, whether they want to adopt these things or suffer the consequences. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the underlying rationale. But our main focus is going to be really on the issue of opportunities as opposed to problems. We have a really interesting and quite diverse panel, although I suspect anybody looking for gender diversity can see very quickly that we don't do particularly well on that. And also when you take a look at age considerations, there's a kind of a high degree of similarity as well. However, having said that, a couple of us have been living in Asia for quite some time. Others of us have been born in a variety of countries, and between us, I'm not exactly sure how many countries we've worked in, but I've worked in about 50 or 60 so far, and I've traveled in over 140 countries, and I know Roger has probably done even better than that. Anyways, I'd like to introduce the panel. Each of us will be talking for about 10 minutes, and that does not mean 15 minutes or 20 minutes. And if I have to signal you, I trust you're going to go ahead and do the right thing. In fact, what I will do is mention to each of you when you've got a minute to go, okay? We have, over the past month as a panel, we have been communicating with one another in spite of the fact that we cover 15 time zones throughout the world. It makes it difficult to organize conference calls, but we've been able to do that. We've also distributed information between ourselves so that we could try and provide some sort of perspective that might be of value to all of us. Roger is going to be starting the conversation and will deal with several things at a fairly macro level. George is going to continue in that same vein. And then we're going to have a bit of a shift. Andreas is going to be dealing with the last mile from his perspective here in Greece. And then we're going to Mehran, who works for a very significant organization providing all kinds of services, to wit Google. And he's going to talk to us quite a bit about having started supply chain activities in his part of Google. And it's been quite a ride, and I'm sure you'll find it very interesting. And then we're going to have Clive bringing it all together in the sense that Clive's experience has involved looking at several hundred organizations, and they've been able to figure out why some organizations' supply chains have been quite successful and others have not. After that, we're going to then have a round table. You can ask whatever you wish. But without saying any more, I'm turning it over to Roger.
Thank you, Mark. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Roger Crook. I've spent 27 years in the logistics industry. Recently stepped away from DHL, where I was head or CEO of global forwarding and freight for DHL, with 45,000 people in over 200 countries. Prior to that, I've had many CEO roles throughout the world, working in the Americas, in Europe, or in Asia Pacific. So I lived throughout the world and traveled to over 150 countries. So, and right now, I would say that I'm in transition to my next opportunity. What I'd like to talk about is the role of third-party logistics and how they can support more to achieve supply chain efficiency, and also how I see some of the trends in the world affecting supply chain now and going forwards. Some of which we've talked about, some of which we haven't talked about, and from a macro perspective. I mean, we're all aware the world is changing very fast. There's more and more disruptions to corporations. And over the last 30 years, corporations have enjoyed compound average growth rate of about 5% in profit, which is quite significant. And this data comes from a recent McKinsey study. And that really has come by globalization of itself, globalization of supply chains, which many of us have experienced, industrial investment, industrial development, rising consumption, so more middle income as well, and particularly lower labor cost. But many of those drivers are actually starting to slow down, change, go away. And the prediction is that over the next 10 years, corporate profits will only grow at 1% compound average growth rate, compared to 5% over the last 30 years. Now, shareholders are not going to accept that. So that's going to put significant pressure on any management within any company to deliver more. We're seeing some of that obviously currently. I mean, the earnings forecast for Q3, for example, in the US is right now is negative. The trend, it doesn't look good from a corporate profit prediction point of view from McKinsey's, and if that comes true, it's going to put a lot more pressure on supply chain experts, on logistics providers to find ways of improving and getting greater efficiencies, more than happens today. So that's one change, one trend that's likely to happen. The other trends that are happening, one of this was mentioned this morning. If we look at what's happening with trade patterns and trade flows, there is a shift going on to the southern hemisphere, particularly between Asia and Africa and Latin America. And the dramatic population growth that we see in Africa and the emerging part of the world is really changing the way that trade flows are happening, but also putting increased demand on corporations to change the supply chain, and actually increasing the breadth, depth of their supply chain and how they operate, and increasing the need for more and more global logistics companies to be able to offer solutions to more and more diverse places. At the same time being able to offer solutions to mature markets. So this trend has been going on and will continue. It's going to make the logistics world, make the supply chain world for all corporations operating globally more complex, and with significantly more cost to operate, particularly high cost to operate to destinations like in Africa, where it's very difficult with the infrastructure the way it is, or the lack of infrastructure. Another area is talent. I mean, there is a talent shortage everywhere in the logistics industry. Whether you look at 3PL, there's really big shortage of talent. There's big shortage of talent within companies, corporations, and their supply chain expertise. And this can only get worse unless we do something about it. And we can do something about it by actually investing in education or investing in pulling people through from education up through organizations, which was something what I was doing very much of in DHL in terms of promoting and giving people opportunities to grow and develop from a very young age. Another trend that I see from a 3PL perspective that is driving change dramatically is consumer behavior, in the sense of consumer demand and the want it now syndrome. I want it immediately. I want my product on my desk today. I want my product delivered to home today. I can't wait till tomorrow. The millennium generation is really here. It's driving e-commerce, and it's going to drive it faster, and it's going to become more and more dominant within our lives. And there are many companies that are coping with it well within logistics or within corporations and have changed their supply chains. But there are many corporations that, as a 3PL, I see that have actually not managed to change their supply chain for e-commerce. And if they don't, they're likely to die slowly. I can tell you that if you look at the top 2-3 smartphone manufacturers, or the phone manufacturers, as we talked about yesterday, one of them has an exceptional handle on e-commerce, and another one, and I'm talking about the brand names do not have a good e-commerce solution for providing to the end user, to the customer. And they're struggling between, do we use distributors or do we use direct to user or direct to home? So, e-commerce, there are big challenges, big opportunities, and this is something that should be on the radar and table of every logistics expert, supply chain expert, and corporation. I think if you look at logistics suppliers themselves, they have a dearth of information. They have huge customer base. They've got a lot of experience of doing business with many customers around the world in different sectors, in different geographies. And this information is not used by many corporations. It was also mentioned yesterday that in the project panel, where customers are not asking, or corporations are not asking the views of logistics providers. They're just telling logistics providers, this is what we want. And this is a gap. And this is an opportunity. And it's the biggest opportunity out there, where if there could be more collaboration on all of these topics between logistics providers and corporations and consultants, then I believe that we can actually solve a lot more supply chain solution needs faster and create much more efficient supply chains in a faster way. So from my point of view, I think that John's book helps a lot from a collaboration point of view, and putting the picture on the road in the sense of segmentation and the need to look at it from a customer behavior point of view. But I think also along that line, we need to collaborate as much as possible to be able to deliver it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Roger. George?
Yes, hello. I'm George Ioannou. I'm professor at the Athens University of Economics and Business. I'm the director of MBA International. And yesterday I had the pleasure to speak about John's book. Yesterday I had prepared a very well-structured speech, and I had everything written down, and unfortunately, or fortunately, we had to stay outside, and so I had to cut bits and pieces and just deliver something almost nearly by heart. So I said today I will not have any structured speech. I will just come and tell you what I think about some interesting issues, I hope. Well, as an academic, I always go back to the basics. And the basics are that supply chains are nothing more than starting from some raw materials, getting through a maze of flows and a huge network of nodes, and then at the other end you have consumers. So most of the people that are here, and most of you, you look at this journey of materials, but rarely do we concentrate on the two ends, which is the starting point and the consumers. And I believe that there will be dramatic changes in these two ends in the years to come. So I will give you my perspective on this evolution. And instead of talking about basic, raw materials that you use to construct products, I will go to the most important raw material, which is energy. Energy is the starting point of everything we do. Either we want to make a product, move it, whatever. And the energy map is going to change dramatically. There have been so many wars about energy, too much money has been invested in energy projects. We can use some of John Gattorna's concepts on supply chains when we deal with energy-related projects, but the map will change. In 2015, there was a report, the annual energy report published in the US, and this report underlined that under any economic scenario related to the oil prices, any scenario related to growth, any scenario related to GDP, by 2017 and all the way up to 2040, US will become a net energy exporter. This fact by itself is indeed a huge disruption in the whole area of energy, and it translates into many, many aspects of supply chains, of products, of companies. I mean, if you go back to the early 70s, 1970s, you remember probably some of you the saying of Henry Kissinger, who was the secretary, very, very powerful secretary of the state in the US, and he used to say that control food and you control people. Control oil and you control nations. So just this fact that US will become a net energy exporter will change everything. Right now, there are huge projects that are taking place in the US and this will come through shale gas. Shale gas, I mean, that's the huge revolution of the last 10 years. And so in the US, there are many, at least two that I know, places where they build facilities for liquidation of the natural gas, and then this will be transported using LNG carriers. Okay. So imagine what changes are coming up that relate to this particular event. Okay. And it's not something that we will wait for long to come. It's happening. The second part is it comes closer to us here in the Mediterranean. 2 years ago, we had a conference organized at our university through the Energy Club that we have within MBA International, the program that I direct. And we had as a speaker the Israeli ambassador. And he was a very senior guy, and he knew what he was talking about. And he was saying, no matter what you Greeks do, the natural gas that we have found will come through Greece and will go to Europe. Okay. So even at this particular part of the world, there are some developments that will affect the basis of every supply chain, and this is energy. So on the other hand, if we move on the consumer's side, I would like to, I mean, for energy, the year will be 2017 in the US at least. But for the consumer side, I believe that we have already passed the point of change. And this was in 2014, because I believe that was the first time that China became the #1 country in the world in terms of GDP. Actually, what is happening in the whole Asia, in China, if you add India and the whole Pacific Rim, reminds me of the shifting of tectonic plates that was mentioned for the first time 3 years ago by Sir Paul Judge during a conference of the Association of MBA's Deans and Directors. Sir Paul had gotten some data about the future of GDP and the past of GDP around the world and aggregated the data in terms of West and East. And he showed us that very soon the GDP of the East will be more than the GDP of the West. And this is not something that we have been used to. We were born and we lived through a world where the GDP of the West was the dominant factor of what was going on. So GDP is an indication of wealth that develops in different countries, and if it shifts towards East, China, India, etc., this will mean that consumers will develop. Up to now, the GDP in China was propelled by infrastructure and production, manufacturing, but the society will raise, and I'm sure consumers will evolve, and they will definitely need products. And we see urbanization in China. You mentioned also Africa, that was mentioned before. So yes, this change of the GDP will lead to new customers, to new consumers, and to new ways of accessing products. So there will be many, many new things to come, many evolutionary things in these particular areas. And I believe the companies of tomorrow, the winners of tomorrow, will try to take advantage of these two developments, energy from one side and the shift of consumers on the other side, and become the leaders. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, George. The notion of the end-to-end that he talked about, the tectonic shifts, the very substantial changes, the potentials for disruption, are really, really quite considerable, especially when you consider it from the point of view of opportunities. We'd like to now shift, instead of end-to-end, the last mile. Andreas.
Good morning. My name is Andreas Athanasopoulos, and I have the responsibility to run Dixon's Carphone warehouse subsidiary here in Greece. It's a 100% subsidiary. It's the largest electrical and electronics retailer in Greece, 100 stores, 2,000 employees, $500 million turnover, and a market share around 30%. So it's a significant player in the market. When you have the opportunity to hear macro views about the world, you get terrified. But sometimes you get even more terrified when you have to shift from the macro view into the micro view, and I will try to make it as swift as possible. So I'm going to try and share with you some views on what we consider at our company as perhaps one of the most important challenges we face going forward, which is called the last mile. Now, the last mile, if you look at statistics or books and research papers, it varies from case to case on how you define it, but it can easily consume 50% of costs when you talk about supply chain costs. So you have to so from a cost point of view, is a very important aspect. But it's not only the cost. Recent developments, and primarily the e-commerce guys, have elevated this last mile discussion into a very, very hot potato. So it's not only a cost driver, but it's also a competitive driver, because to a very large extent, if you look at the e-commerce or retail discussion in recent years, there are 3, 4 very important pillars. One is products. Very likely, in any retail setting you visit or in any website you visit, more or less you will find the same products. And as suppliers of products consolidate, because many players live from product areas with low margin, you increasingly, not only you see the same products, but you see the same SKUs. So from a product point of view, it's very difficult to differentiate. You move into pricing. Pricing, to a very large extent, has been left to little spies, who they spy one website to the other. So it's a matter of seconds to match prices. So you can have price competitive advantage for seconds to maybe minutes, maybe hours, but that's it. So what is left is consumer approach and customer service and supply chain, and how to be competitive on that respect. That's why it's not questionable why all these companies have moved their value proposition to strengthen very much their approach to be close to the consumer, fast to the consumer, and as easy as it can. Over there are 2 schools of thought. There's one school of thought: try and find anybody who is driving towards a direction, load him with a basket, and please them to go to a consumer. That can be Uber, that can be drop points, it can be anything. And there's another school of thought that says, well, this is too important to leave it to third parties, so I have to insource it. My group, Dixon's Carphone Group, is to a very large extent biased to the second direction, say insource it. And the reason we do that is because we are transferring big boxes like refrigerators, and we are transferring big boxes that people want somebody to install it. And not only that, they want somebody to take away the old one to recycle it. And this is a quite considerable business if you think about it. And too many things can go wrong, or things from time to time, things get returned. And if you are not careful enough and you have a refrigerator on the way to a consumer that has a bump somewhere, that can lead to at least 30% cost. The return cost may be more than 30%. So you have to be very careful. So within this sphere of last mile, I would like to add maybe 5 or 6 remarks. One remark is that customers become very, very demanding. So you have to... A recent UPS study in the US about e-commerce and online shoppers says that 93% of customers, when they are online, the same holds when they are offline also, trying to find ways to escape from transportation costs. Nobody wants to pay money for whatever they've purchased to arrive at their home. They feel increasingly, consumers, that this should be a gift. Unfortunately, it's not a free gift, and this is where complications start. So one is, you have to respect what consumers want. The second is, you have to try and innovate across this last mile journey, and therefore you start making bundles. So in our company, when we move to a specific customer, we try to aggregate all the purchases that this consumer has made, irrespective of whether it's a smartphone or a refrigerator, and go once to the customer. We started doing it from a customer service point of view, because you start getting into all sorts of difficulties, and especially in big cities with a lot of traffic, people hate waiting for somebody to deliver. Therefore, you have to go once. But increasingly, this bundling is becoming very complicated, especially when you use third parties, and you have happened to have one bunch of products in one third party, another one in a different third party, how to aggregate these things to have one visit to a customer, it's a complicated story. So one is respect customers. The second is try and build bundles as an escape to customer service and cost. The third is the transformation of supply chain from the dominant distribution centers or fulfillment centers, as Amazon called them, into a node system of having multiple distribution centers in our country, but in other countries also, to be agile, to try to promise next day delivery and use a single distribution center is becoming increasingly an infeasible task. So you have to start building nodes. Nodes make the problem multi-dimensional, so the optimization there is a bit more complicated, but the way we see it is that we have to think about multi-fulfillment nodes. The fourth dimension is that increasingly the cost of delivering is becoming higher and higher. We see increasingly some of the big guys increasing delivery costs, and therefore you have to be, you have to build more bundles, and at the same time trying to offer alternatives to customers like loyalty schemes that somehow, invisibly, customers spend the money that you spend in order to make transportation. Fifth, all this last mile discussion is putting a lot of pressure on the generic concepts of inventory management, the way we've grown as a mechanism to develop arbitrage between supply and demand. This is what, from a theoretical point of view, you can consider inventory management, but these days we need much more dynamic inventory management, and dynamic inventory management is easy to say, but much more difficult to implement and deploy throughout the system. But the way the pressures of last mile will be mounting as we proceed, and therefore the way we manage inventory needs to be rethought. And the last remark I'd like to make is that this last mile discussion is not only opening the forward challenge, but also the backward challenge. So if you are very good at last mile in delivering items to consumers, you have to be very fast and effective insofar as the returns policy is concerned. And this is where people also struggle. The cost of returns can be immense. In our company, we're trying to manage this cost of returns in two ways. One is by pushing more consumers to install the products. So when you install the products, you increase the opportunity that the customer tells you, yes, this is what I wanted, and that's it. And secondly, whatever happens, you see it in front of you. So if there is an accident to the product, you can negotiate on the spot, and we have an e-commerce technology to renegotiate on the spot the customer a discount in order to keep the product instead of taking the product back. So the reverse gear into the last mile is as important the forward gear. So these 6 remarks I would like to make on a topic that I think will be much more prolific and much more important in the years to come, because the major e-commerce suppliers are pace setters on this specific topic, and whoever wants to survive in this retail new world has to be very effective on the last mile. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Miran.
Well, thank you. My name is Mehran Ravanpay. I work for Google. I've been with them for 3 years, and frankly, last 3 years, I had to unlearn everything that I've learned about supply chain the last 28 years. And the reason behind it is that the approach is completely different. And I think last day and today, we've heard a lot about the challenges, the problems. We have heard about the processes and tools. But frankly, supply chains are about people, and that's what I want to talk about. I want to talk about the effect of people on supply chain, and especially alignment. around how do you create alignment within the supply chain teams as well as outside of the teams. Frankly, Google's organizational structure lends itself to make that very, very easy. And first and foremost is around the hiring process and assimilation. What we have learned is that the how is as important as the what piece. And the way we test for that is we hire folks that they are inherently collaborative. They are willing to work together, and they're not all about I, but more about we, and work as in a team environment. The other thing that it's very important is on the performance side, managers' input is one data point. Actually, most of our peers rate us in terms of how we deal with each other. So actually, we are in the performance season right now, and we're all trying to figure out, what our peers are going to tell us about how we performed last year as a team. So that becomes very, very critical. So once you have the individuals and you bring inherent collaboratives and aligned and willing to communicate and talk, it's all becomes about the organization. And how do you structure an organization? Again, Google's organization inherently is very flat. CEO level has 35 direct reports. So what that allows is that the communication becomes very, very clear. You don't have to go through this telephone business of, CEO said this and said this and said this. Everybody hears the same message all the time. And the same thing within our organizations as well. So the communication becomes very easy. The other side of it is that the fact that innovation doesn't get stifled. If I have, a team and a manager under that organization, and that person has another manager, the ideas typically don't make it up fast. This flat organization allows quick ideas and getting those ideas and speedy approach to idea management. Also, at the team level, what we have done is this is a very global setup, so we have very clear understanding of roles and responsibilities, even though it's a very, very flat setup organization. The third piece of that is that the organizations are developed, or teams are developed, not because you have to have a supply chain organization or you have to have a manufacturing engineering organization. Those organizations and teams are put together primarily because to solve a problem. Actually, when I was hired, I wasn't asked to go build a supply chain team. I was asked, how do you get cell phones to the hands of the customer? Or better yet, how do you get Android in the hands of the customers? It wasn't about go put a procurement team together or a planning team. We had to develop those muscles, but what we had to do was to solve a big problem, not necessarily go create an organization, build a hierarchy, and try to feed that monster. And those organizations, if they're not needed, and once you achieve what you have to achieve, are dismantled, and folks go and work on different projects or programs, which is very, very uncomfortable, but very, very effective in terms of dealing with, again, building ideas and getting alignment around a project or program or solving a major problem. The third piece of it is around leadership. The leaders are not hired based on experience, but based on, again, capabilities. And actually, within the team, if a project changes or a program comes about, if there's somebody within the team that has more experience and knowledge, automatically that person becomes the team leader. Within our team, we do the same thing. We bring the leaders that they know what the problem is. If our demand planning is an issue or planning is an issue, that person takes the lead and becomes the driver of that program or project. Again, very, very uncomfortable situation to be as a leader with many, many years of experience, but again, it works very, very well. Leaders are looked at to have both IQ and EQ. It's a very, very important for us to understand our team members' needs and requirements, both on the personal side as well as the work side, and being able to help them and allow them to be successful. Again, I'm looked at, again, by peer feedback that I get from my employees or the team members is around how well I've helped them to be successful, and I get rated that way. The one thing about the organizations, one of the things, like I said, putting a team and an organization together, the first team member that I brought on board, actually Keisha is in the audience, was around analytics, to really understand what problem we were trying to solve. It wasn't that, hey, we'll go put a procurement team together and start buying parts. It's like, okay, what problem are we trying to solve? Analytically figuring out, numerically figuring out, you know, if you want to get cell phones in the hands of the customer or get Androids more in the hands of the customers, what are the things that you need to do? And then that analytics and data drove the organizational structure that we put in place. And that was very, very important for the team, especially in Google where numbers talk, and we had to have numbers. And then the last part, the objectives, we have talked about KPIs. Actually, what we call it within our language is objectives and key results. It's not around, you know, inventory turns. It's not about, you know, how your forecast accuracy. It's more around what big problem did you solve, and how close did you get to solving those major problems. So sub-metrics and KPIs within the team obviously have those traditional supply chain metrics, but primarily what we're looking at is how many people actually did we touch in terms of getting Android or Chrome in their hands, and solving that problem. And better yet, and how many people do we allow to have access to internet and get more information globally. And that's the metric that I'm measured. And actually, it's very gratifying to have such a huge objective team-wise. So I think between individuals that we hire, the team structures that we put in place, an organization, the leadership that we have put in place, and the way we measure our metrics, we have really created a huge alignment within the teams globally to be able to all march towards the same goal. Again, I came on board 3 years ago as the first consumer hardware supply chain person, and now we have grown the team to be a large organization.